So today's Daf Yomi is Bava Metzia Daf Gimel, and the Gemara is discussing our Mishnah, the opening Mishnah of Shnai Mochsin Betalis, and the first Mishnah of our Masechta. And the Gemara has tried to prove that our Mishnah is not necessarily inconsistent with Ben Nanas, and also not inconsistent with the position of Sumchus. That was what yesterday's Gemara discusses. Today the Gemara says as follows: on the top of Gimel Amud Aleph, we're going to start around 8 lines from the top. So Gemara says maybe our Mishnah is not consistent with the position of Rabbi Yossi. Lema Masnisin the Loka Rabbi Yossi. The Ika Rabbi Yossi, because if you want to say our Mishnah, which says that Shnayim Olsen, that Batalis, that if two people are grabbing a talis, then each one should take an oath and then they split it, is not like the position of Rabbi Yossi. The Ika Rabbi Yossi, Amar, Rabbi Yossi said, "Im kain ma hifseid Ramai." What did the liar lose? So what's the case of Rabbi Yossi, where he says, "If so, what did the liar lose?" This is the case, which we're going to get to, God willing, in 34 days in Hamafkid. There we learned in Parak Hamafkid about two people who each deposit money with a shomer, with a watchman. One person puts $100 and the other person puts $200. This one says, I put in 200, and this one claims that he put in 200. And the Tana Kama says that under these circumstances, that each one should get back $100, and the rest, the remaining 100, should be given and put aside till Elijah comes. But Rabbi Yossi says, if that's the case, what did the Ramai lose? What does the liar lose? He's got nothing to lose. So therefore, Rabbi Yossi says, neither one should get anything. All the money should be put aside until Eliyahu comes. And that way the liar can be either disincentivized not to do it, or alternatively, the liar will admit that he was lying. So if that's the case, the Gemara says, well, let's say that our Mishnah, which says that we're concerned that they each take an oath and then they split it, is not like Rabbi Yossi. The Rabbi Yossi, Omar Imkain might have said Ramai. Rabbi Yossi says, what does the liar have to lose? So if that's the case, in our case, what does the liar have to lose? He's getting half. Rabbi Yossi would say that in our case, everything should be set aside until Elijah comes. So the Gemara says, Elamai Rabbanan. So if that's the case, what do you want to say? That this is the position of the Rabbanan? Well, if that's the case, even the Amarei Rabbanan, Hasharye Munach Yavo Eliyahu. So if you want to say this is the position of the Rabbanan's still saying that case that 100 of it has to be put aside until Elijah comes. So that if that's the case, Hanami Kishar Dami. So if according to the Rabbanan are going to be in the position that everything should be put aside until Elijah comes. The Rabbanim, even though they don't say that everything should be put aside until Elijah comes, they still say that some of it should be put aside until Elijah comes. So if that's the case, Anami Kishvar Dama Bisvekehi. So they would say at least, and according to our Mishnah, nothing is put aside. But since this whole Mishnah is talking about a case of Suffolk, it should also be put aside, at least according to the Rabbanim, because it's all Suffolk. So if that's the case, Haimai, the Gemara says that's not a strong argument. If you say in the case of where one person puts in 100, the other one put in 200, and they both claim 200, in that case, the Rabbanim say that you should put it aside only 100, because for sure this 100 that's remaining for sure belongs to at least one of them. And so therefore, Amri Rabbanan therefore the Rabbanan say it should be put aside until Elijah comes. But here in this case, since we could say that this cloak that they caught really, or they grabbed, really possibly belongs to both of them, Amri Rabbanan Polig Bishvua, the Rabbanan should say that you should divide it by an oath, because in this case, it could possibly belong to both of them. But if you want to say it's the position of Rabbi Yossi, Hashto Ma Hasam the Bevadai excuse me, since according to Rabbi Yossi, that in that case, certainly Ika Mano Amar, the Ika Mano Amar, for sure in that case, at least they both for sure have at least 100. And still Rabbi Yossi says, yeah, Muna Hachi still Rabbi Yossi says you should leave it all aside until Elijah comes. Hachad Iko Memer the Chaminaihu, well, Kolshkein, for sure in this case, where you could say that at least it belongs to one of them, the Iko Memer, for sure in this case, where you could possibly argue, in this case, it's possible to say that it doesn't belong to both of them, and it possibly only belongs to one of them, the Iko Meimar. And in this case, you could possibly say the Chaminai or Koshkim for sure should be put aside until Elijah comes. And Gemara says, no, not necessarily. Afilu Tema Rabbi Yossi. You could even say in this case, Rabbi Yossi doesn't say you should put it aside. Why? Awesome Vada Ikaramai. For sure, in that case, one of them was lying, and so therefore you should at least put it all aside there because for sure there's at least one liar. Maybe in this case, not one of them is lying. Maybe in this case, both of them grabbed it at the same time, so therefore neither one of them is lying. So therefore, Rabbi Yossi doesn't argue that you should put it aside. Or inami, or alternatively, in that case, hasam kanisle Rabbi Yossi or Ramai. Or alternatively, in that case, Rabbi Yossi is penalizing the liar. So in that case, why is Rabbi Yossi penalizing the liar? Because we want the person who put in the 200 who's now getting nothing to admit it. But hacha, my pseida islay the lodai. But in this case, what actually is he losing that would force him to admit he didn't have anything to begin with? And so therefore, Rabbi Yossi might say in this case, you're not going to penalize the other person by forcing this guy to admit. So the Gemara says, no, that's not, the second answer is not a good solution. Bava Metzia, Gemara says, this idea that we're going to say that there the rabbis are penalizing him because he put in money, but in case of a lost object, he's not necessarily losing anything, so we're not penalizing him. That only works in the case of a lost object. But what would we say about a mekach or memkar? But in the case of a sale, he's actually losing something. So Rabbi Yossi, how would Rabbi Yossi explain that he's splitting it? So therefore, so, but therefore we have to say it's clear, like we said initially, the initial answer, which is that in this case, it's not certainly the case that one of them is lying. So the Gemara says, but still, Bain or Rabbanan, Bain or Rabbi Yossi, still, even according to the Rabbanan or according to the Rabbi Yossi, Hasam Gabe Chanvani al Pinkaso. What about both according to the Rabbanan and according to Rabbi Yossi, who said that in the case of the Mana, the Rabbi Yossi says you put everything in to the side until Eliyahu Hanavi comes, and Rabbanan would say you put 100 aside until the case of until Eliyahu comes. Hasam Kabe Chanvani al Pinkaso. In the case of which we had said in yesterday's daf, the case of bananas about a shopkeeper and his pinkas and his ledger. What's the case that we said yesterday about the shopkeeper and his ledger? This is the case, just to review, where there was a balabayas, a guy who was an owner of a field, and he had workers working for him, and he said to the shopkeeper, you should pay these workers. And the shopkeeper came along and claims he paid the workers, and the workers claim that they weren't paid. So in this case, so what was the law in this case? That going back to the Gemara in Kedushin, so hold on one second, let me just read the Rashi here. That what was this case? Hold on, that there was a shopkeeper and his ledger, and both claim that they don't have the money that was owed to them. The shopkeeper says I paid it, and the worker says he never got the money. So according to the Rabbanan, they both come and they both take the oath. One says he paid, and one says he never got it, and so therefore he has to pay both. Whereas Benana says we don't force them to take an oath, because then for sure one of them is lying, and so therefore instead he pays them without them taking an oath. So The Gemara now says both according to Rabbanon and according to Rabbi Yossi, Hasam Gabi Chanvani al Picasso, the Katani Zenishba Benoto Zenishba Benoto, where we say according to Ben Nanas that both of them swear and take it, or according to Rabbanon, both of them swear and take it. Why don't we say, why is that case different that we don't say there that we take it from the Baal bias and we put it aside until Elio comes? For sure, in that case, there's for sure a liar. So according to your answer, where it says if somebody's lying, that you would take it, at least the money aside. Well, in this case, somebody's for sure lying. So both according to Rabbi Yossi and the Rabbanon, they should say in that case, you should take the money and put it aside because for sure one of them is lying. So the Gemara says, no. Amri Hasam Hainu Time. No, there the answer is different. What's the reason there that it's different? What's the reason in that case where we say that he has to pay them even though for sure one of them is lying? So he says that case is different. The reason there is that the shopkeeper could say to the Baal Bias, the shopkeeper could say to the Baal Bias, listen, you asked me to pay them. I'm simply acting as your agent. My Islay Gabe Sachir, what do I have to do with these hard workers? Even though he's taking an oath to me, I never said I'm going to get into a relationship with this guy so that I have to believe his oath. You're the one who believed him. Delo Amartli, you didn't tell me Bisahadi. You didn't tell me Bisahadi Havle. You didn't tell me that I have to pay him with witnesses. And so therefore it's not my fault that he's acting this way. I should get paid. I should get paid right away. Visachir Nami, and the hired workers also, they could say to the Baal Bias, Ana Avda Avidasa Gabech, I worked for you. Mayisli Gabech Hanvani. What do I have to do? I have no relationship with this shopkeeper. Avagav the Mishtabli, even though he's taking an oath to me, I don't believe him. Therefore, in that case, both of them are supposed to take an oath and take it from the Baal Bias. The Gemara says, Tani Rebbe Chia, the guy says, you owe me $100. He says, no, actually, you owe me nothing. I owe you nothing. And the witnesses testify that he actually owes him 50 zuz. Then we're going to say that he has to give him 50 zuz and he has to take an oath about the rest. Meaning to say, normally we have a case called Modav Mixas. If you have a partial admission, you take an oath. But in this case, the guy denied everything, and it's the witnesses who come along and say you owe part of it. So now in this case, we're going to say you still have to take an oath, says Rebbe Chia's Brisa. Why? Because we don't want to say that your partial admission is greater than the testimony of witnesses, Mikal v'chomer, meaning to say that if you have to take an oath, if you partially admit it, if you partially admit it, for sure, if the witnesses come and say that you owe this money, for sure you have to take an oath. Tuna, and they connect this idea to our Mishnah. And so, how does it connect to our Mishnah? Our Mishnah says that if two people are holding the talis, each one says, I found it. The toughest. Now, since in this case, each one is holding it, Anan Sahadi the toughest. We say that which he's holding, it's as though he's holding his, umay the toughest, haididehu, that each one is holding what belongs to them. So that's what we're assuming. So basically, that each one is holding the part that belongs to them, vikatani shava, and we say in the Mishnah that each one has to take a shvua. So this proves that the testimony by the Eidim should require them to take an oath on the other part. The Gemara says, no, that we cannot going to learn it from our Mishnah. The Gemara says, "My shalote odas piv gedol me ados edim mikav chomer." But why does it say that? What was the reason why Rebbe Chia said we're not going to allow his admission to be greater than the witnesses from mikav chomer? So the Gemara says this is what Rebbe Chia meant. Shalot tomar, that we don't want you to say odos pivu derami rachman shvuale kideraba. We don't want you to say that if a person partially admits it, then you have to take an oath like what Rabbah said, that makes us Hatana Yishava, that if you have a partial admission to a claim, you have to take an oath because Chazaka Ein Adam Mei is Panam B'nei Bachobo. because there's a presumption you're not going to be so arrogant as to deny a claim to your creditor, either because, as Tosa says, the creditor knows that you're lying, or because Rashi says in Bava Kama that the creditor has done you a favor. And so therefore, this person who's partially admitting really wants to deny everything. But the only reason why he's not denying it is because he's not going to be so arrogant. And so too, this person would really want to completely admit it. And the reason why he doesn't admit it is he just wants to get rid of the creditor, because Savar, as we saw in he says, I just want to delay him until I have the money. And so therefore the Torah says, just throw an oath on him so that he'll admit it. But when you have the testimony of witnesses, the lekom machar hachi, where you can't make this claim, so maybe we shouldn't make him take an oath. Kamashal kal v'chomer. There's a kal v'chomer. My kal v'chomer. What's the kal v'chomer? What's the logical argument? Uma piv she'e mechayvo mamon mechayvo shvua. We say, what is the kal v'chomer? Just like if a person admits it on his own, that it can't make him pay money. Meaning to say, the Gemara is going to have to say what that means. But it makes him take an oath if he admits it. Witnesses that can force him to make him pay money. For sure, they can make him take a shvua. And the Gemara says, what do you mean? He says his own testimony, his own admission can't make him pay money. Didn't we say that if somebody admits something, it's like there are 100 witnesses? And the Gemara says, no, my mamon, what does it mean? What does it mean to say his own piv cannot make him pay money? It means kinas. It means his own penalty. Just like if he admits something on his own, he doesn't pay the penalty. Obligate him to take an oath. Also kinas, witnesses which can obligate him to pay a penalty. For sure can make him pay an oath. Gemara says, but still, that's not a good kal v'chomer, because malapiv shekei mechayvo carbon. Your own admission can make you bring a carbon. Which type of carbon? A chatas. If a person admits to what he did, then he has to bring a sin offering. Tomar be'edim she'em mechayven also carbon. But the witnesses cannot make him bring a chatas if the person contradicts it, as Rashi explains, that if the two people say, if he rejects the claim of the two witnesses, then he doesn't have to bring a carbon chatas. So if that's the case, how can we bring this kal v'chomer? So Gemara says, "Halol kasha." That's not the difficulty. Why? Rabbi Chia, Rabbi Meir Sfirli. Rabbi Chia holds like Rabbi Meir. The Amar Eidim Mechayven so carbon kal v'chomer. Rabbi Chia holds that the witnesses can in fact require him to bring a sacrifice from a kal v'chomer. It's not Amar lo shnayim achal tochel. Two people said you ate the forbidden fat. He says I didn't. The mayor says you do have to bring a carbon, or a mayor holds like the chachamim. So I'm a Rabbi Meir. If the two witnesses can force him to be executed, for sure they can make him bring a sacrifice. They said to him, no, the chachamim say no, because he could say, he can get out of it. He can say, yeah, I did it, but I did it intentionally, so I'm a potter. And so therefore, for this reason, they can't make him bring it if he refutes them about accidental. So the Gemara says, if that's the case, so the Gemara says, I'll give you a different reason why Rabbi Chia's kal v'chomer is no good. Just like if he admits it on his own, he can have to bring a carbon asham, but witnesses cannot make him bring a carbon asham. The Torah says, he has to confess in order to bring the asham. Mar says, asham and a carbon. No, it's just like a chata. So a mayor would require him based on witnesses. If that's the case, maybe it's el malapiv shekain eno mechayv chomesh. Well, if he admits it on his own, then in the case where he lied about under oath and he admits it on his own, then he still has to pay a fifth. But if the witnesses come along and say that he lied, then we don't make him pay a fifth. So we see that witnesses are weaker than admission on their own. So the Gemara says, Halokasha, Rabbi Chia, Rabbi Meir Sfirle. No, here too, Rabbi Chia holds like Rabbi Meir. Just like where Meir says you have to bring a carbon from a kal v'chomer, so too he says you have to bring a chomesh, an extra fifth from the kal v'chomer. So he says el malapiv she'ein shekein eno ba'achashu ba'azama. So what about your own admission that if you admit to something, then you cannot be contradicted by witnesses. Basically, you pay it even if witnesses say it's not true, or even if witnesses try to be do Eidei Azama by saying you couldn't have done that. Tomar be'edim sheyesh machashav v'azama, it doesn't apply in the case of machashav v'azama. So therefore, what's Reb Chia's basis? The Gemara is going to say El Asya mi Eid Echad. The Gemara is going to learn out Reb Chia is coming from what witness? Ma Eid Echad she'em mechayv mamon mechayv shmua. It's like one witness which cannot obligate you to pay money, can obligate you to bring an oath. Edim shemechayv also mamon eno din shemechayv also shmua. For sure, witnesses which can force you to pay money, for sure, they can force you to take an oath. And the Gemara is going to challenge that and go on and on. So we're going to stop here. And God willing, pick this up on Shabbos Kodesh, and we'll repeat this. And everybody should have a beautiful Shabbos. Shkoyach.
Thank you.